House of Israel International Services are held weekly at 3601 Rose Lake Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28217, 11 a.m. Saturday mornings and 7 p.m. Thursday evenings, Eastern Time. This live broadcast is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Motivating. Inspiring. Challenging. Encouraging. Deepening. Strengthening. And enhancing your faith. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to House of Israel International's live worship service.
So today we're going to be talking about Leviticus. We are looking at the introduction, have quite a few slides that I want to share with you all this evening. And so we'll be going back and forth with these particular slides. Now, as we wrote out in our description of this teaching for tonight, the writings of Moses given to him by YeHoVaH present a continual journey from creation to the deliverance of the children of Israel out of Egypt, and the giving of the Torah, also known as the law, also known as the commandments of God. One of the first things that we want to point out, I want to point out in this particular teaching, and we've talked about this in times past, is that when Moses wrote, he did not write in the format of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Moses did not write the law in the segments they're now in. The formats of our Bibles are the work of theologians and translators. And it's important for us to understand that. Moses wrote what is referred to by many as the book of the law of God, a.k.a. the book of the law of Moses, a.k.a. the book of Moses. And this is how it's referred to, Moses' writings in the Bible. In the Torah, Moses' writings are called the book of the covenant and the book of the law. And we'll see this, for instance, in Exodus 24:7, we see the book of the covenant. In verse 7 in Exodus 24 says, "And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that YeHoVaH has said will we do, and be obedient." And so we see here that not only the people said that they would do what was read out loud from the book of the covenant, but that they would be obedient to these instructions. And then we see in Deuteronomy 29:21, it's referred to as the book of the law. And YeHoVaH shall separate him unto evil out of all the tribes of Israel, according to all the curses of the covenant that are written in this book of the law. And so we see it referred to as the book of the law, and then we see it referred to as the book of the covenant. We see also in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 10, "If thou shalt hearken unto the voice of YeHoVaH your Elohim to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law. And if thou turn unto YeHoVaH thy God with all thine heart and with all thine soul." And then in the following chapter, chapter 31, verse 26, it says, "Take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of YeHoVaH your Elohim, that it may be there for a witness against thee." And so many, because of the Hebrew there for law, Torah, or Torah, people refer to it as the Torah. However, when we deal with people in our modern conversations, especially in the surrounding world of people who live with us in this world, and especially the community of the church, they don't refer to the law as the Torah. The Torah is a term that seems to be specifically used among Messianics, Hebrew roots, Israelites. But when it comes down to the church, the world around us, they refer to it as the law, and in some cases the Old Testament, but rarely do you hear a non-messianic refer to the law as the Torah. In other writings of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and New Testament writings, Moses' writings are called by various names. And I'm pointing this out because I want to make a point when I get through with these particular references. It's referred to as the Book of the Covenant in 2 Kings, chapter 23, verse 2. And the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. Now, that's in 2 Kings 23. In Joshua 1:8, it's referred to as the book of the law. Joshua says this book, or the Almighty is speaking to Joshua and telling him, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. And so Father shows Joshua that if he wants to have good success and be prosperous in his journey and walk with the Most High, it's important that this book of the law, referring to the writings of Moses that was given to him by YeHoVaH speaking, that they should not leave forth from his mouth. So what is he saying? Joshua, you keep the words that I spoke on your lips. That when you communicate, when you speak, you make sure that, one, you meditate on this word, and not just sometimes, but day and night. In other words, the more of this word that you get in you, the more you meditate on it day and night, and then do. So it's hearing and doing, then you will be prosperous and successful. And that wasn't just for Joshua's era. That is for all eras, for all generations. The book of the law of God is referred to Joshua by Joshua. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of YeHoVaH. And so we see that when Moses finished writing, Joshua continued to write, and here's how we have the whole book of Joshua. Nehemiah 8:18. Also, day by day, from the first day unto the last day, he read in the book of the law of God. In the book of the law of God. And they kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day was a solemn assembly according unto the manner. So here in Nehemiah, after the children of Israel had been released to come back, Nehemiah refers to it not as the book of Moses or the book of the law of Moses, but the book of the law of God. So he wasn't subscribing it to Moses. And then in Joshua 8:31, we see, as Moses, the servant of YeHoVaH, commanded the children of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones over which no man hath lifted up any iron, and they offered thereon burnt offerings unto YeHoVaH and sacrificed peace offerings. Joshua 23:6, be ye therefore very courageous to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, that you turn not aside therefrom to the right hand or to the left. 2 Kings 14:6. But the children of the murderers he slew not, according unto that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, wherein YeHoVaH commanded, saying, the father shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall be put to death for his own sin. And as we continue, back in Nehemiah 8, it says, and all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate, and they spoke unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which YeHoVaH had commanded to Israel. So we're seeing the book of the covenant, the book of the law of God, the book of the law of Moses. We see that it has all of these different names or references. And now we see the book of Moses reference. 2 Chronicles 25:4. But he slew not their children, but did as it is written in the law in the book of Moses, where YeHoVaH commanded, saying, the father shall not die for the children, neither shall the children die for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. 2 Chronicles 35:12. And they removed the burnt offerings that they might give according to the divisions of the families of the people to offer unto YeHoVaH, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so did they with the oxen. Ezra 6:18. And they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their courses for the service of God, which is at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. Nehemiah 13:1. On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever. And then we look at these New Testament references. Mark chapter 12, verse 26. And as touching the dead, that they rise, have you not read in the book of Moses, how in the bush God spoke unto him, saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. And then we find in Galatians chapter 3, verse 10. But as many as are of the works of the law under the curse, for it is written, cursed is every man or every one that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law, to do them. And so we see that in the New Testament, we find the book of the law, we find the book of Moses, and then we look at the Old Testament, the Tanakh, and we see all of these references to the first 5 books of the Bible. And they seem to, especially once you get into the New Testament, points to Moses, not to YeHoVaH who gave these instructions to Moses, but to Moses. Terms like the Mosaic Law and other titles given to the writings of Moses that were given him by YeHoVaH has given or led theologians and those who read their translations to misappropriate or inappropriately ascribe the writings given to Moses as coming from him and not coming from YeHoVaH. And so when people talk about that law, they talk about something dirty and ugly and cursed. And then they ascribe it to Moses, and once they relegate it to Moses, they're not under that law, because that was given to Moses for a people for a specific period of time. And if anybody is under that law, it's the Jewish people. This is the rationale of people, and it causes them to discount the first 5 books that are in the Bible, but hold on to that which is serviceable or that meet their need. And so it's important for us as we go through the Bible, as we study the Word of God, YeHoVaH, that we understand that, as I stated, YeHoVaH spoke, Moses wrote. And so when Moses states and Yeshua quotes that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of YeHoVaH, that which Moses wrote came forth from the mouth of YeHoVaH. He spoke it. Moses was simply a scribe. Now, when it comes down to the first 5 books of the Bible, YeHoVaH did mostly all the speaking. When it comes to other books of the Bible, we find that those names, Joshua spoke about a lot of things. YeHoVaH spoke through Joshua, spoke in Joshua. The Chronicles, the Kings, the Psalms, the Proverbs, the prophets. We see that it is clear that there are places where the prophet would say, "Thus saith the Lord." And we could separate what he said from all of the other things that is written. Just like when we talk about the red letter editions of the New Testament or the Gospels, we can see that the red letters are the words that Yeshua spoke, but the black letters are attributed to someone else. And so the gospel contains God's word, but the whole gospel is not the word of God. The words in black are not the words of YeHoVaH if you have a red letter edition. It is the words that Yeshua spoke that are in red. So who are all those other words in the black lettering? And this goes all the way through the Bible, but the bulk of what we write or what we read in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the book of Moses was given to him where he specifically scribed the words that were spoken by YeHoVaH. So YeHoVaH spoke, Moses wrote. Now, some interesting facts. The word Leviticus is not found in Scripture. Nowhere. Leviticus is the name that has been given to a segment of the instructions Moses was commanded by YeHoVaH to write. There are many theological terms used by modern religion pertaining to YeHoVaH's word that has taken on identities of their own. So when a person hears the term Mosaic law, what are they referring to? The first 5 books of the Bible? Mosaic law is not in the Bible. Mosaic is not in the Bible. But it's a term that is freely used among modern religious people that is supposed to identify certain books of the Bible. It's a term. Leviticus receives its name from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and its meaning relating to the Levites. However, its Hebrew title, Vayikra, or Vayikra, is the first word in the Hebrew text of the book and means, and he called the Lord. He, the Lord called, or he called, referring to YeHoVaH. And so, but when you look at the term, the root of Leviticus is what? Levi. Now, what's interesting is Leviticus is also named because it concerns mainly the service of the worship at the tabernacle, which was conducted by the priests who were the sons of Aaron, assisted by many from the rest of the tribe of Levi. Now, this is from Zondervan's Bible, but the fact of the matter is that when you begin to look at worship, well, we'll touch on that. When was Leviticus written? The historical period during which Moses lived seems to be fixed with a fair degree of accuracy by 1 Kings. We're told that the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel was the same as the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of Egypt. Since the former was 966 BC, the latter, and thus the date of the Exodus, was somewhere around 1446, assuming that the 480 in 1 Kings 6:1 is to be taken literally. That doesn't give us when it was written, but it gives us an idea of when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, the Exodus, and then we know sometime after that, Moses goes up in the mountain and he starts receiving instructions, but prior to him going up in the mountain, he had received instructions from the time he went to that burning bush in the back of in the desert while he was tending his father-in-law Jethro's sheep. The writings in Leviticus appears to have been given to Moses while Israel was assembled at Mount Sinai, not all of them, but mostly before they left the mountain, as indicated in Numbers. And so when we get into Numbers, we're going to see that the children of Israel now begin to wander begin to move forward to go into the land of promise. But they had spent, after coming out of Egypt, about a year at the foot of the mountain. And we know that we finished last week Exodus, where we saw that Moses was instructed to set up the tabernacle on the first day of the first month. The first day of the first month. The first month was Aviv. They came out of Egypt on the 15th of Aviv. They will celebrate the Passover that particular year, as we saw in Numbers chapter number 9. Exodus closes with Moses having the tabernacle set up and the glory of YeHoVaH manifested in the cloud and in the fire that covered the tabernacle. Who wrote Leviticus and to whom? The writings contained in Leviticus were scribed by Moses for the Israelites and those who joined themselves with them in Egypt. They came out of Egypt with Moses and the children of Israel, this great multitude. And we don't see that once they got out of out of Egypt, that they split off and went somewhere else. They see, it's like, where else are they going to go? They went, it seems, with Moses and the children of Israel and camped around that mountain. This is why when we see the Torah, the law, the writings, Father says there's one law, one law for Israel and all those who join themselves. One law for Israel and the strangers. And this carries on to this day, because for us to benefit from the Almighty, we have to become part of his family. And his firstborn is Israel. He is his firstborn son. We are grafted in who have not from a tribe of Israel, now are brought into the commonwealth of Israel, according to Paul's writings in both Romans and in Ephesians. Why was Leviticus written? Or what was its purpose? Interesting. Leviticus gives the laws and regulations for offerings, for sacrifices, including instructions on cleanness and uncleanness, moral laws, food laws, holy days, Sabbath years, and the year of Jubilee. Now, there's a lot more in it, but those are the overarching themes as we're going to go through the book. The writings of Leviticus gives the laws and regulations for worship, including instructions on ceremonial cleanness, moral laws, holy days, the Sabbath year, and the year of Jubilee. Now, I had removed this word worship because I was so accustomed to thinking that Leviticus had to do with the worship of God in the tabernacle. What's interesting, though, is the word worship is only mentioned once in Leviticus, and it is in the form of "you shall not." So the central theme of Leviticus seems to focus on holiness and perfection, not worship. Why? In Leviticus 26:1, the only place where the word shakah, which we get the word worship from, says, "You shall make you no idols, nor graven image, neither rear you up a standing image, neither shall you set up any image of stone in your land to bow down unto it. For I am YeHoVaH your Elohim." It's the only time worship is mentioned in the whole book of Leviticus. Worship is already established in the book of Genesis. It's established in the book of Genesis, and we see the children of Israel worshiping in the book of Exodus. So Leviticus really, there will be some instruction, but that's all the way in Deuteronomy. Whereas when according to when we get to Leviticus 16, where it talks about Leviticus 16 deals with the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. However, Leviticus 23, we find the days that is associated with when we are to celebrate the feast, but at certain of those feasts is where the first fruit and the third year tithe is presented, and it is at those feasts where when those offerings are presented according to Deuteronomy 25 or 26, where we are now supposed to present those offerings, and then we bow down in worship once we recite the prayer that is supposed to be recited at the presentation of those offerings. And there, that word worship is to bow down. So the Levites, and we're going to deal with that issue. Let's move on. The word sacrifice is mentioned 40 times. Sacrifices, plural, are mentioned 6 times. Worship is mentioned once in the negative. Sacrifice and sacrifices combined is mentioned 46 times. And so it is believed that when Paul mentions in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, about us becoming living sacrifices, he was alluding to the burnt offering, which is the first offering or sacrifice mentioned in Leviticus. And what we're going to see is that the first 3 sacrifices are voluntary. The sin sacrifice is not even mentioned until the 4th chapter. Several sacrifices are mentioned before we get to the 4th chapter, which is an indication that the system was set up for us to have fellowship and communion with the Most High. That we are to present ourselves, present our offerings to the Almighty in fellowship, and that it is to be wholly consumed by the Almighty, which is what Paul talks about. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, in view of what he has done, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, with this holy and acceptable unto the Almighty, which is your reasonable service or your reasonable act of worship. And that refers to being wholly committed, wholly consumed for the service of YeHoVaH. Not for the services of others, not for partial services, not for when you feel like it, not just on the Sabbath, but every day we are in the service of the Almighty, where he desires to order our steps, where we're instructed to inquire of him, to acknowledge him, all of our ways, to trust him with all of our hearts, so that he will guide us. Leviticus 1:1, this is where I believe Paul was referring to. And YeHoVaH called unto Moses and spoke unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying. Now notice these words, brothers and sisters, because when we get into this, it's going to be important for us to notice what is said. Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, if any man of you bring an offering unto YeHoVaH, you shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd and of the flock. And we're going to break those down, because cattle means it doesn't. When you hear cattle, you hear moo moo here in the United States and most parts of the world. But this word cattle, it encompasses the moo moo, but it encompasses so much more than a steer. Here's where it gets interesting. Verse 3, if his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. And then he shall offer it of his own voluntary will. It's not a requirement. But if he's going to do it, there are specifics that the Almighty has said, this is how you do it. And you don't decide how you're going to do this. He's decided. But what you get to decide is that this is voluntary. It's of your own will. And then at the place of the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before YeHoVaH. So what we're going to find in Leviticus as we go through these passages is that Leviticus demands perfect animals for its many sacrifices and perfect priests or priests without any deformities to offer those sacrifices. And we're going to see that Leviticus is about holiness and perfection. It's really what it's about. And Yeshua is going to point us to the perfect sacrifice and the perfect priest. And as we go through, we're going to see that there are some serious restrictions that the Almighty has incorporated in his word. And he's pretty serious about what it is that he wanted, what he required of his people. And if his people followed the instructions as he gave them, they wouldn't have issues. Now, that doesn't mean they wouldn't have problems, but they certainly wouldn't have issues with him. There will always be neighbors who's looking for ways to take you out or to take what you have. There will always be those who try to usurp your authority. Because even as we're going to see, Moses had his own family members and other members of the priesthood who challenged him, who questioned him, even to the point to where Moses ultimately allowed these individuals to get under his skin because he did not guard his heart at certain intervals. And that in itself caused him to not be able to go into the promised land, which he has spent the last 40 years of his life leading people to. It's a terrible thing to have an instruction to take a people into a certain place, get to the door of that place and say, okay, you can't go in because. And that's not a cruelty on YeHoVaH's part, because there is no one more merciful than him. His mercy endures forever, but his instructions are solid. He does not compromise when it comes down to the instructions that he gives, even though people may try to compromise those instructions. And we're going to see over and over and over that, when Father speaks, now he's slow to anger. He's plenteous in mercy. He's long suffering. He's very patient. But when he does decide to move, he has every right to move. And no one could say anything, unless they're wicked and evil anyway, because of how long he put up with the things that he finally decided to do something about. The order of offerings, as depicted in the first 3 chapters of Leviticus, focuses on voluntary offerings associated with fellowship with YeHoVaH. And this is where we're going to see the burnt offering in chapter 1, the grain or meat offering in chapter 2, the fellowship or peace offering in chapter 3. And of course, by the time you get to chapter 4, now it's going to deal with sin. But long before Father addresses sin, he says, listen, here's what I want. I want to be at peace with you. I want to be in fellowship with you. I want us to get along. I want to bless you. I want you to walk in obedience to me, and that's going to require you making a voluntary, conscious decision. And you can't be going back and forth on your decision. You can't be today all for it and then tomorrow in a different place, because he don't change, and he doesn't want us to change our minds about the commitment. When Moses said everything, when the people of Israel said everything he say we're going to do and be obedient, then by their own confession, Father has something to hold them to, and by his confession, the people had something to hold Father to. That's covenant. When a person breaks covenant, then there's a breakdown in the relationship. And so, again, the burnt offering in chapter 1, the grain or meat offering in chapter 2, the fellowship of peace offering in chapter 3, and then in chapter 4, we'll deal with the sin offering. Things to keep in mind as we go through this study. And these are things that I want you to think about. There's a lot more. We're going to point out so much in Leviticus that I believe are very pertinent for us today if we look at it through the eyes of the Most High. Because with all of this, we're going to see that what Father ultimately is going to require by the time we get to his first king is what he wants for us more than any sacrifice or any offering is to offer ourselves wholly. And when we offer ourselves wholly, then what do? We obey him. If we love him, we keep his commandments. If we love him, we obey him. And this is where he's going to speak through the prophet to the first king. He said, listen, obedience is better than sacrifice. Father never desired, as we're going to get to Hebrews, and he never desired the blood of animals. That was not his desire. Not for sin. He has no problem with us offering sacrifices. But he wants, if we're going to do it the way he prescribed. Don't come up with some new way to try to please him, because he's already informed us how to please him. If we're going to pursue him to please him, then let's just do what he say. So keep these things in mind as we go through these 27 chapters. Yep, 27 chapters. YeHoVaH has already decided that he wants to be in fellowship with us. We're going to see this in the first 3 chapters. But we're going to see, we've already seen it, because he provided a seed named Moses in Egypt, raised him up, and then equipped him in the house of the Pharaoh to be a leader, and then took him to the back of the desert to be a shepherd, and then combined these two abilities, leadership and an overseer, to lead the people and then to shepherd them in the wilderness, to equip them and to prepare them as a nation to go into a land where they would set up their own government, because the government is going to be established. Everything is going to be established, so that when they enter into the land, they now, after they divide the land, establish the tribes in their tribal land, establish a central place where all the people would gather and hear the word and understand that he would be the king, the government in order and structure. All of that is found in the book of Moses. So YeHoVaH has already decided that he wants to be in fellowship with us. Here's what we have to remember. We decide how we will be in fellowship with him. I remember back in the day as I was sharing, with my wife, when we first started this journey, the question that I kept being confronted with is, how far do I go with this? I mean, how deep into this do we go? Do we stay on the perimeters like so many? Do we get our feet wet? Do we go out into the deep? Do we take what this instruction is and apply it in every area of our lives? Because that's the only way it works. It's the only way it works. Otherwise, you got a hybrid religion where you now have decided what kind of fellowship and what kind of relationship you're going to have with the Almighty. He's already decided what kind of relationship he wants to have. So the only way I can have the kind of relationship with him that he desires to have with me is I look at his instructions and align myself with his instructions instead of trying to get him to align himself with the kind of relationship I want to have. Because see, whether we realize it or not, that's how we deal with people. We determine how we're going to have relationships. And a lot of the rules that we govern those relationships by are unspoken. It's assumptions. We assume you know these things. But how do we assume you should know? Because we know it, but we haven't clearly communicated. And so when we enter into relationships, there's just certain things that are assumed but haven't been clearly articulated. YeHoVaH has clearly articulated. He's clearly articulated the kind of relationship he wants to have and how we fit the standard of being found pleasing in his sight. Our choices and decisions are the outcome and fruit of the type of relationship and fellowship we have determined to have with him. See, whatever the relationship, whatever the type of relationship you're going to have with him, it's going to show itself in your decisions, in the outcome and fruit. So, just how committed are you? I was thinking as I was communicating day before yesterday, it was yesterday, these days are just seemingly running into each other. But the conversation is that, since I've been called to ministry, since 1991, I don't think I've ever called in sick. The only Sabbaths I haven't been here is not because of some sickness or disease, it's because I'm out somewhere else preaching and teaching. When it comes down, since we started our Thursday services, it's like, the only times we haven't been here is when we, as a team and a group, decide we're going to take a day off. It's not because of some sickness or some disease. It's a decision we make as a team of people. And so when I think about the commitment, part of that commitment is because of the type of relationship I've determined that I'm going to have with him. And the type of relationship that I've determined I'm going to have with him is based on how he has determined the kind of relationship he wants to have with me. And I know that the relationship he wants to have with me is to be fully available 24/7 And it took me a while to kind of grasp this. But a few years ago, we began to talk about how, we have to remember that he is with us always. All day, every day. Now, am I aware of that? Because what makes me aware of that is going to be determined by the relationship that I've decided I'm going to have with him. Do I want a 24/7 relationship with him? Do I want to be in relationship with him 24 hours a day, every day? Because if that's my decision, then now I'm going to be cognizant that he's with me, I'm with him, and I have to remind myself of that during the course of the day, because there are times when, you could kind of see things progressing and try to warn people and talk to people and communicate and commune with them. And, it's a terrible thing when folks don't want to take your counsel or listen to you. But I have to come to the conclusion, they've decided that's the kind of relationship they want to have. You see, no matter what relationship I decide I want to have with the Almighty, I can't make somebody else have that kind of relationship with him. I desire it for them because I see the benefits of it. I see the advantages, the pros, if you would, of having that kind of relationship. Why? Because in that kind of relationship, I know that he's with me always. He's meeting all of my needs. Now this is going to sound a little weird, but he's at my beckoning call. If I call on him, I expect him to answer me. But guess what? If he calls on me, he expects me to answer him. If he wants to tell me to go left, then he expects me to go left. So, it's like we become these two peas in a pod, except he's the pod. Right? He's the pea in the pod and the pod itself that I'm in. So, but the whole point is that's a conscious decision that I have to make every day. I can't make it last week. When I get up in the morning, I have to make that decision all over again. This is the day YeHoVaH has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day YeHoVaH has made. I want my daily bread today. I want everything that he's ordained for me today. I want to be in relationship. I want to be in communion. I want to be walking in his kingdom. I want his will to be accomplished in my life. I want all these things today. And tomorrow, repeat. And the next day, repeat. So it's not a decision I made one day. It's a decision I have to make every day. Every day. It's a decision you have to make every day. And I can tell you, brothers and sisters, there will be circumstances, there will be things that will come at us. And something else I figured out, I decide how I'm going to start my day. I'm not going to let circumstances start my day for me. So how do I do that? How do circumstances come? How do people get at you? Through some form of communication. And most of the communication is the phone, either text, the computer, emails, phone calls. So here's what I decide, because here's what I know. If I get up and I go to that computer and I see stuff coming at me that needs my attention, guess what? I'm off to the races. If the phone wakes me up and somebody's on that other end and they got an emergency situation, I'm off to the races. Depending on the circumstance, do I have time to get on my face? Have I been awakened out of my sleep? So, I've decided I'm going to put my phone in a different room. I'm not going to go to my computer or pick up my phone until I've spent my time with my Father in heaven. Because whatever is on that phone or that computer, I need his wisdom, I need his strength, I need his patience, I need his guidance, I need his leadership, I need his direction, I need his instructions in order to be able to deal with it. Because the tendency with all the stuff I know, with all the wisdom I got, the tendency is to employ my knowledge, to employ my wisdom to the situation. And if I do that and don't inquire of him for his wisdom, I've already started this thing off wrong. But that's the tendency. If I don't get started with him, then I'm going to employ what I know, my knowledge, my understanding, my wisdom. And all I got to do is look back and see how that's worked for me. See, it's that has brought me to the point of where I am today. And I'm going to tell you, Father can give you wisdom and give you understanding and give you insight in a situation. And if you're not careful, you'll try to take that wisdom, insight in that situation and apply it over here. No, you need a new set of wisdom. You need new insight because that circumstance over here, though there may be some similarities, it's a different circumstance. So I need to pray about that. I need to inquire of him. And when we look at what he's setting up in Leviticus, we have to remember our choices and decisions are the outcome and fruit of the type of relationship and fellowship we've determined to have with him. We will make our decisions based on our wisdom, our knowledge, or understanding, and the information we have. Or we will make our decisions based on his wisdom and his knowledge as instructed in his word. But here's the bottom line. We make the choice. We make the choice. This is why it is important for us to read his word, to know his word, to have his spirit, and to inquire of him. Because no matter how similar that situation is, there's a difference. There's a difference. Just like no two, as they say, no two fingerprints are the same. No two situations are identical in every way. Father does not force anyone to do anything. However, that does not mean he will not put obstacles or deterrents in our way to get us where he wants us to be or to go. We got a good example with, what's that guy who jumped on that ship to Tarsus when he was told to go to Nineveh? Remember him? Remember Jonah? Father ain't gonna force you, but he put obstacles in your way. And even when that fish, when Jonah made a decision in the belly, I don't want to have to make decisions under that kind of pressure. If he'd have just simply obeyed the instructions as they were given, he could have avoided all that. But that's an example of what happens when we don't. See, you and I can choose to be obedient to YeHoVaH, or we can make the choice to be defiant, obstinate, rebellious, stiff-necked, or stubborn. Again, the choice is ours to make. However, in the end, his will be done. That we know because we've read the end of the book. We see those who think they're smarter than him. We read about those who figured out that they could do it a different way, only to find out that they were giving place to the enemy, and ultimately they would end up with the enemy. We don't want to be that people. And so as we're going through Leviticus, we are looking and we're going to see the instructions, and it starts out with being in fellowship, where we offer the offerings of burnt offerings, fellowship, peace offerings, and meat offerings or grain offerings. Now, we're also going to see that YeHoVaH is concerned about the offerer as he is concerned about the offering. So when you hear me talk about, that, as we bless those who give and the gift, that he's as concerned about the giver as he is about the gift. We're going to see that over and over. Later, we're going to see, and we mentioned that and gave you a little bit on that as we did, that YeHoVaH would make it clear that obedience from the offerer is better than the sacrifice or the offering offered. And that's what we're going to learn, and so much more as we go through the book of Leviticus, remembering that it is a continuation of Moses' writings. And so just keep that in mind as we go through. Father in heaven, we just thank you. We thank you for this time that you have given us. We thank you for the instructions, the introductions and understandings, and all the things that have been pointed out. Help us to appropriately apply what we've heard and how to move forward as we go through this study, bringing glory and honor to your name. Amen. Shalom, saints. Tithing and giving first fruit offerings are critical parts of the believer's faith and has its foundation back in Genesis 4:4, when Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And YeHoVaH had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Abel was commended by YeHoVaH in Hebrews 11:4, where it states that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:9-10, honor YeHoVaH with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. The prophet Malachi wrote in chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, to bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says YeHoVaH of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there should not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says YeHoVaH of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith YeHoVaH of hosts. When we tithe and give offerings consistently in obedience to YeHoVaH's commandments, we can count on him to keep his promises to us and consistently meet all of our needs. It is our Father's desire to bless you. However, it begins with you and your act of obedience to tithe and give offerings. Do it today. Shalom.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. House of Israel International Services is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Thank you.